After carefully monitoring strange purple wheat for several seasons, a farmer notices something extraordinary. The crop grows stronger and more resilient each year. What he uncovers next leaves him in tears, as his discovery could change the future of farming forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Michael stood frozen at the edge of his wheat field, in Montana, his weathered hands trembling as he held the peculiar wheat stalk. The morning sun caught the plant's surface, revealing an impossible shade of deep purple that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. He had been farming for over 3 decades, but nothing in his experience could explain what he was seeing. The wheat wasn't just purple, it seemed more vigorous, taller, and healthier than any crop he'd ever grown. As he walked deeper into the field, the strange purple stalks became more numerous. They stood out starkly against the normal golden wheat, creating an almost mystical pattern across his land. The purple wheat towered nearly 2 feet higher than the surrounding crops, their stems thick and sturdy despite the recent windstorms that had damaged other sections of his field. The morning dew clung to the unusual plants, creating a mesmerizing sparkle that made them appear almost ethereal in the early light. Michael's calloused hand traced the unusual texture of the purple wheat's surface. Unlike normal wheat, these stalks had a slightly waxy coating that felt almost metallic to the touch. The heads of wheat were larger too, packed with kernels that shared the same striking purple hue. As an experienced farmer, he knew this was unprecedented. Wheat simply didn't grow like this. Each kernel seemed to pulse with vitality, and the entire plant radiated a kind of strength he'd never witnessed in his years of farming. His mind raced with possibilities as he surveyed the mysterious growth. Could this be some sort of contamination? A mutation? Or perhaps seeds that had somehow mixed with his regular wheat? But he had been using the same seed supplier for years, and nothing in their catalog remotely resembled what he was seeing now. He'd attended countless agricultural conferences and trade shows, yet he'd never heard even a whisper about anything like this. The discovery couldn't have come at a more critical time. His farm, like many others in the region, had been struggling against increasingly unpredictable weather patterns. Last year's drought had nearly bankrupted him, forcing him to take out additional loans just to keep the operation afloat. This year's early frost had threatened to destroy what little hope he had left of turning things around. The bank had already sent him 2 warning letters about his mounting debt, and his equipment was starting to show its age with no money for repairs or replacements. As he examined the purple wheat more closely, he noticed something even more baffling. The soil around these unusual plants was different, darker, richer, and more fertile than the surrounding earth. The purple wheat's root system seemed to be improving the soil quality, rather than depleting it like normal crops did season after season. When he dug his fingers into the earth around the purple stalks, the soil crumbled perfectly, revealing a network of healthy earthworms and beneficial insects he hadn't seen in his fields for years. Michael pulled out his phone with shaking hands and began documenting everything he could see. He photographed the purple stalks, their unusual height, the improved soil condition, and the striking difference between these plants and his regular wheat. But as he zoomed in on one of the photos, he noticed something that made his breath catch in his throat. Tiny purple seedlings were already sprouting around the mature stalks, weeks ahead of any normal wheat germination schedule. The young shoots seemed to emerge directly from the soil without any human intervention, defying everything he knew about wheat cultivation. This wasn't just unusual growth, it was impossible growth. Wheat didn't self-seed during the same season, and it certainly didn't improve soil quality. Whatever he had discovered here defied everything he knew about agriculture, and he had a feeling it could be either the miracle his farm needed or a disaster waiting to happen. His years of experience told him that anything this unusual could be met with skepticism or even fear from the agricultural community. Looking across his field, Michael could see the purple wheat had already spread to cover nearly a quarter acre. The plant seemed to be thriving despite the harsh Montana climate that had been so punishing to his regular crops. They stood tall and proud, their purple heads swaying gently in the morning breeze, almost as if they were beckoning him to uncover their secrets. The contrast between these vigorous purple stalks and his struggling golden wheat was stark, a visual reminder of just how extraordinary this discovery might be. The sound of distant farm machinery brought Michael back to reality. His neighbor Tom would be starting his morning round soon, and Michael wasn't sure he was ready to share his discovery yet. He needed time to think, to plan, to understand what he was dealing with before word got out. In a small farming community like theirs, news traveled fast, and something this unusual would spread like wildfire. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Michael realized he needed to make a decision. Should he alert the agricultural authorities about this discovery, contact his local farming cooperative, or keep this remarkable find to himself until he better understood what he was dealing with? The last thing he wanted was for his farm to become a circus of scientists and reporters if this turned out to be something significant. Yet the potential implications of what he was seeing were too enormous to ignore. Little did Michael know, as he stood there contemplating his next move, that this mysterious purple wheat would soon change not just his life, but potentially the future of agriculture itself. The decision he would make in the next few moments would set in motion a chain of events that would transform his struggling farm into something beyond his wildest dreams. He took one last look at the mysterious purple wheat, its surface still shimmering in the morning light, before heading back to his truck to fetch some sample containers. Whatever this was, he needed to approach it methodically and carefully. Life hadn't always been this challenging for Michael Anderson. His 300-acre farm in the rolling hills of Montana's Golden Triangle had been in his family for 4 generations, passed down from his great-grandfather who had first broken ground here in 1923. In those days, the Anderson farm had been known throughout Chouteau County for its bountiful harvests and innovative farming practices. Michael's father, James Anderson, had been one of the first in the region to embrace sustainable farming methods in the 1980s, earning them both respect and skepticism from neighboring farms. The old farmhouse still stood proudly against the big Montana sky, its weathered blue paint and wraparound porch telling stories of better days. Photos hanging in the living room showed the farm in its glory days, golden wheat fields stretching as far as the eye could see, his father standing proudly beside their first modern combine harvester, and a young Michael learning to drive a tractor with his dad's guiding hands over his. Each image captured a moment of triumph, of the Anderson family's deep connection to the land they had nurtured for nearly a century. But the last 5 years had brought challenges that even his father's wisdom couldn't have prepared him for. Climate change had hit the region hard, transforming the once predictable growing seasons into a roller coaster of extreme weather events. Last year's devastating drought had been followed by unprecedented spring floods, and now this year's early frost had threatened to destroy what remaining hope he had of a decent harvest. The weather patterns that his father and grandfather had relied upon were becoming increasingly erratic, making traditional farming knowledge less reliable with each passing season. The financial toll had been severe. Michael's desk drawer was stuffed with overdue bills and bank notices, each one a reminder of the mounting crisis. The latest letter from Montana First Bank had been particularly dire. They were considering calling in his loans early due to missed payments. His once substantial savings had been depleted by emergency repairs to aging equipment and the constant struggle to keep up with rising costs of fertilizers and pesticides. The numbers in his ledger kept turning redder, despite his best efforts at cost-cutting and efficiency improvements. Every morning as he walked through his fields, Michael could see the signs of decline. The soil, once rich and fertile, had become increasingly depleted despite his best efforts at rotation and conservation. Traditional wheat varieties were yielding less and less each season, requiring more intensive inputs just to produce a mediocre crop. The irrigation system his father had installed was showing its age, with frequent breakdowns that he could barely afford to fix. Each repair seemed to cost more than the last, and parts were becoming harder to find for the aging equipment. The human cost was perhaps even harder to bear. His wife Sarah had been forced to take a job in Great Falls, commuting an hour each way to help make ends meet. He missed their morning coffee talks and the way she used to help him plan the season's crops. Their 2 children, Emma and Jason, had both left for college with dreams of their own, but Michael could see the worry in their eyes whenever they came home to visit. They knew the farm's struggles could jeopardize their education, though Michael had promised himself he would sell his own kidney before letting that happen. The thought of being the generation that lost the family farm haunted his sleepless nights. The coffee shop conversations in nearby Fort Benton had grown increasingly somber. Other farmers were facing similar challenges, and several had already sold out to large agricultural corporations. Just last month, the Peterson family, who had farmed the neighboring land for 3 generations, had packed up and moved to Missoula after selling their property to AgriCorp International. The sight of their empty farmhouse haunted Michael every time he drove past. The community was changing, losing its identity one family farm at a time. His own farm's production numbers told the grim story. 5 years ago, he had consistently produced 45 bushels of wheat per acre. Last year, despite investing in expensive new seed varieties and additional fertilizers, he had barely managed 32 bushels per acre. The cost of production had skyrocketed while wheat prices remained stubbornly low, squeezed by international competition and changing market dynamics. Each harvest brought less return on investment, making it harder to justify the increasing costs of modern farming. Even his father's old journal, filled with detailed notes about soil management and weather patterns, seemed outdated now. The climate had changed so dramatically that the wisdom of previous generations no longer applied. The steady rhythms of planting and harvest that had guided farm life for centuries had become unpredictable and chaotic. Michael often found himself rereading his father's careful observations, wishing the solutions to today's problems could be found in those yellowed pages. Michael had tried everything he could think of to turn things around. He had attended agricultural seminars, consulted with extension agents, and even experimented with new drought-resistant wheat varieties. He'd invested in soil testing and precision farming technology, hoping that better data would lead to better yields. But each new approach seemed to bring more costs than benefits, and the fundamental problems remained. The modern farming techniques that promised salvation often required capital he simply didn't have. The community had noticed the changes too. At the last county fair, the Anderson farm booth had been noticeably smaller than in previous years. The blue ribbons that once lined the walls of his office were now faded reminders of past successes. Even his trusted farmhand, Pete, had reluctantly reduced his hours, unable to support his family on the declining wages Michael could afford to pay. The annual Harvest Festival, which the Anderson farm had always helped organize, had been scaled back significantly this year due to budget constraints. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Michael's shoulders every day. He wasn't just fighting to save a business, he was fighting to preserve a way of life, a piece of American agricultural heritage. His great-grandfather had survived the Dust Bowl, his grandfather had weathered the farm crisis of the 1980s, and his father had adapted to changing markets in the 1990s. Now it was his turn to face the challenges of a new era, but the solutions seemed more elusive than ever. The early morning discovery of the purple wheat had left Michael shaken, but he knew he needed to investigate further before jumping to any conclusions. After collecting his initial samples and taking photographs, he returned to the farmhouse to gather proper equipment for a more thorough examination. His hands were still trembling as he pulled out his father's old field testing kit from the dusty shelf in the garage. A leather case worn smooth from decades of use. The kit contained various tools for soil pH testing, moisture measurement, and basic plant analysis, equipment that had helped his father make crucial farming decisions for decades. The sight of the familiar tools brought back memories of countless mornings spent with his father in these same fields, learning to read the land's subtle signs. A farmer must be part scientist, his father always said, because the land speaks to us through signs we need to understand. Now, facing this unprecedented discovery, those words carried more weight than ever. Returning to the field with his equipment, Michael began a systematic investigation of the area where the purple wheat was growing. The morning sun was higher now, making the unusual coloring even more apparent against the traditional golden wheat surrounding it. He marked off a square meter of the affected area and began taking soil samples at various depths, his experienced hands working methodically despite his growing excitement. The soil around the purple wheat was unlike anything he'd seen before, rich, dark, and teeming with life. When he compared it to samples taken just a few feet away in the normal wheat section, the difference was striking. Using his father's old pH meter, Michael tested both soil samples. The readings from the purple wheat area showed perfectly balanced soil conditions, while the regular wheat soil displayed the same acidic tendencies he'd been struggling with for years. This didn't make sense. He hadn't treated this section any differently from the rest of his field. How could the soil composition be so dramatically different? He repeated the test 3 times, each reading confirming what seemed impossible. As he continued his investigation, Michael noticed something even more peculiar. The purple wheat seemed to be affecting the surrounding plants as well. Regular wheat stalks closest to the purple ones appeared healthier and more robust than those further away. It was as if the purple wheat was somehow enriching not just the soil, but the entire microenvironment around it. The boundary between normal and enhanced growth was so distinct it looked almost artificial, like a line drawn in the earth. A gentle breeze rustled through the wheat field, and Michael observed how differently the purple wheat moved compared to his regular crop. While the normal wheat swayed and bent with the wind, the purple stalks remained remarkably stable, their stronger stems barely yielding to the morning breeze. This resilience could be invaluable in Montana's often harsh weather conditions. Michael's scientific curiosity wrestled with his practical farmer's instincts. Part of him wanted to immediately share this discovery with agricultural experts who might help him understand what he was seeing. The University Extension Office was just a phone call away, and they had always been helpful with unusual crop situations in the past. But another part, the part that had watched countless family farms disappear into corporate ownership, urged caution. In today's world, extraordinary discoveries often meant lengthy studies, government intervention, and corporate interest, none of which typically benefited small farmers like himself. He thought about calling Sarah at her work in Great Falls to share the news, but decided against it. His wife had enough worry on her plate already, and he didn't want to raise her hopes until he better understood what he was dealing with. Instead, he pulled out his phone and began documenting everything meticulously, just as his father would have done. The morning light was perfect for photography, and he made sure to capture every unusual aspect of the purple wheat: its height, color variations, soil conditions, and impact on surrounding plants. The more he observed, the more questions arose. The purple wheat's growth pattern defied normal agricultural logic. Not only were the stalks significantly taller and more robust, but they seemed to be utilizing water more efficiently. The ground around the purple wheat retained moisture better, despite receiving the same amount of rainfall as the rest of the field. Even more baffling was the apparent resistance to common wheat diseases. There wasn't a single sign of the rust that had been plaguing his regular crop. As Michael carefully collected more samples, his mind raced with possibilities. If this wheat proved to be naturally resistant to disease and drought, while simultaneously improving soil quality, it could revolutionize farming not just in Montana, but worldwide. The implications were staggering: reduced need for pesticides and fertilizers, improved soil health, better yields, and possibly even the ability to grow wheat in previously unsuitable conditions. But with that potential came risk. What if the purple wheat was some sort of invasive species? What if it spread uncontrollably and caused unforeseen problems? The weight of the decision pressed down on him. His father had always taught him that farming came with great responsibility, not just to their own land, but to the broader agricultural community. Any decision he made now could have far-reaching consequences. He thought about his children, Emma and Jason, and their future inheritance. Would this discovery secure their legacy, or put it at risk? The pressure of making the right choice felt almost overwhelming. Looking across his field, Michael noticed a few more patches of purple starting to emerge among the regular wheat. The spread seemed controlled, not aggressive, but it was definitely happening. He needed to make a decision soon about how to proceed. The practical concerns were mounting. Would his regular harvest be affected? Should he isolate the purple wheat somehow? What would happen when harvest time came? Each question led to more questions, and the answers seemed frustratingly out of reach. His thoughts were interrupted by the distant sound of a truck engine. Tom Baker, his nearest neighbor, often drove past this section of the field on his way to town. Michael quickly gathered his equipment and samples, not ready yet to explain what he was doing. As he hurried back to his truck, he caught himself feeling almost guilty, as if he were hiding something illicit rather than investigating an unusual crop development. The secrecy felt foreign to him. Farming had always been about community and shared knowledge, but this situation felt different. Back in his truck, Michael carefully stored the samples in his cooler and began making notes in his field journal. His father had always emphasized the importance of detailed documentation, especially when dealing with unusual situations. He recorded the exact location of the purple wheat, its approximate spread, the soil test results, and his initial observations about its effects on surrounding plants. Each detail might prove crucial in understanding this phenomenon. The morning's discovery had shifted something in Michael. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope about his farm's future. But that hope was tempered with uncertainty and fear. He knew the next decisions he made would be crucial, not just for his farm's survival, but potentially for the future of agriculture in his region. As he started his truck's engine, he realized that this discovery might be exactly what he'd been praying for, or it might be something far more complicated than he was prepared to handle. Over the next few days, Michael threw himself into researching and documenting everything about the purple wheat. He converted his father's old workshop into a makeshift laboratory, setting up tables for his samples, and pinning detailed photographs to the walls. The space, which still smelled of engine oil and old wood, became his sanctuary as he worked to understand this mysterious discovery. Every surface slowly became covered with notes, diagrams, and testing equipment. As his investigation deepened, he started by organizing his findings methodically. On one wall, he created a timeline marking the first appearance of the purple wheat and its subsequent spread. Another wall displayed close-up photographs showing the unusual characteristics, the metallic sheen of the stalks, the deeper root systems, and the improving soil conditions. His father's old microscope, rarely used since his high school science projects, now sat prominently on the main workbench surrounded by dozens of carefully labeled sample slides. Sarah noticed the change in him immediately when she returned from work that evening. The defeated slump in his shoulders was gone, replaced by an energy she hadn't seen in years. While he decided not to tell her everything yet, she could sense something was different. "You're up to something," she said with a smile, as he hurried through dinner to return to his workshop. "Just some crop experiments," he replied, trying to keep his voice casual. But he could tell from her knowing look that she wasn't entirely convinced. Working late into the night, Michael began documenting the growth rates of the purple wheat compared to his regular crop. The differences were staggering. Not only did the purple wheat grow faster, but it seemed to require significantly less water. He set up a series of controlled areas in the field, marking them with discrete stakes that wouldn't draw attention from passing neighbors. Each test plot was carefully measured and monitored, with detailed notes recording every change, no matter how small. In one test area, he deliberately withheld irrigation to observe how the purple wheat would handle drought conditions. To his amazement, it continued to thrive while the regular wheat showed immediate signs of stress. The purple wheat's root system seemed to find moisture deep in the soil, accessing water resources that normal wheat couldn't reach. Even after 2 weeks without additional water, the purple wheat remained vibrant and strong, its leaves showing no signs of wilting or stress. The soil improvements were perhaps the most exciting aspect. Years of intensive farming had depleted his soil, requiring ever-increasing amounts of expensive fertilizers to maintain yields. But the soil around the purple wheat was actually improving in quality. When he tested samples under his father's microscope, he found increased microbial activity and organic matter content. It was as if the purple wheat was naturally regenerating the soil's fertility. Each new soil test revealed higher nutrient levels and better structure than the last. Michael began keeping a detailed journal, just as his father had done before him. Each entry documented new observations and theories about the wheat's behavior. Day 7, he wrote one evening. Purple wheat continues to spread in controlled patches. Surrounding soil shows 47% increase in organic matter content. Regular wheat growing adjacent to purple patches shows 23% increase in vigor. No signs of adverse effects on neighboring plants. Noticed increased earthworm activity in purple wheat zones, counted 32 earthworms in a single square-foot sample, compared to 8 in regular wheat areas. He started experimenting with different growing conditions in small, controlled areas. In one section, he planted purple wheat seeds alongside regular wheat to observe their interaction. In another, he tested different soil types to see if the purple wheat's beneficial effects would occur in poor soil conditions. He even set up a small greenhouse test using old windows from the barn, creating a controlled environment where he could monitor temperature and moisture levels more precisely. Each test brought new surprises and possibilities. The potential implications of his discovery kept him awake at night. If this wheat could improve soil quality while requiring less water and no chemical inputs, it could transform agriculture. Farmers struggling with drought and soil degradation might have a chance at survival. But with these exciting possibilities came nagging concerns about unintended consequences. He found himself spending hours researching similar agricultural breakthroughs on his laptop, trying to anticipate potential problems or challenges. One morning he noticed something particularly striking. Birds and beneficial insects seemed more attracted to the purple wheat sections. Bees buzzed around the plants more frequently, and earthworms were abundant in the soil beneath. It was as if the purple wheat was creating its own thriving ecosystem. This observation led him to start tracking wildlife activity around the different wheat varieties, setting up a wildlife camera to monitor activity during different times of the day. Michael also began quietly collecting seeds from the mature purple wheat stalks, carefully storing them in labeled containers in his workshop. He knew that if this wheat proved to be as revolutionary as it seemed, having a secure seed stock would be crucial. Each evening, he would spend hours examining the seeds under his microscope, noting their unusual characteristics and comparing them to regular wheat seeds. The purple seeds seemed to have a slightly different structure, with a thicker outer coating that might explain their enhanced resilience. The practical farmer in him couldn't help but calculate the potential economic impact. If the purple wheat maintained its current characteristics, he could potentially double or triple his yield while significantly reducing input costs. No more expensive fertilizers, reduced irrigation needs, and possibly fewer pest control measures. The savings alone could pull his farm back from the brink of financial disaster. He started creating detailed spreadsheets projecting potential yields and cost savings, the numbers growing more promising with each new calculation. But despite his growing excitement, Michael maintained strict secrecy about his discovery. He worked in his fields during off hours to avoid attention and carefully concealed his test plots from casual observation. When neighbors drove by, he made sure to be working in other areas of his farm. The only person he considered telling was Pete, his trusted farmhand, but even that felt too risky at this stage. The weight of the secret was heavy, but the potential consequences of premature disclosure felt even heavier. As the days passed, Michael developed a deeper appreciation for the complexity of his situation. This wasn't just about saving his farm anymore. It was about potentially changing the future of agriculture. The responsibility weighed heavily on him. He thought about his father and grandfather, wondering what they would do in his position. Would they share this discovery immediately, or would they take time to understand it fully first? Each new test and observation only reinforced the magnitude of what he might have discovered. 2 weeks after his initial discovery, Michael began noticing changes that sent waves of anxiety through him. The purple wheat was spreading faster than he had anticipated, with new patches appearing in unexpected places across his field. While the effects on soil quality and neighboring plants remained positive, the rate of expansion was becoming harder to control or conceal. Each morning brought new surprises, and not all of them were welcome. One particularly concerning morning, he discovered a patch of purple wheat nearly 50 yards from the original site. The spread pattern didn't follow any logical cultivation lines. It was as if the wheat was somehow migrating on its own. Despite his extensive farming experience, he had never seen anything like it. Even more puzzling were the variations he was starting to observe within the purple wheat itself. The seemingly intelligent way it was spreading made him question everything he knew about plant behavior. Some of the newer growth showed subtle differences from the original plants. The purple coloration seemed deeper in some patches, almost midnight blue in certain lights. These darker variants appeared to grow even faster than the original purple wheat, their stalks reaching heights he'd never seen in any wheat variety. When he tested soil samples from these areas, the readings were off the charts in terms of nutrient content and microbial activity. Each new test brought results that seemed to defy conventional agricultural science. In his workshop-turned-laboratory, Michael's wall of photographs and notes had become increasingly complex. Red strings now connected different observations, creating a web of interconnected phenomena that both excited and terrified him. He found himself staying up later each night, poring over research papers about wheat genetics and soil biology on his laptop, trying to find any precedent for what he was witnessing. The walls were covered with charts tracking growth rates, soil composition changes, and weather patterns, each dataset more perplexing than the last. Sarah was beginning to worry about him. "You're obsessing over these experiments," she said one evening, finding him still in the workshop, well past midnight. "I haven't seen you this focused since." Her voice trailed off, both of them remembering the difficult years when they'd tried everything to save the farm. Michael wanted desperately to share his discovery with her, but fear held him back. What if something went wrong? What if this miracle turned into a nightmare? The weight of the secret was starting to affect their relationship, creating a distance that hadn't existed before. The isolation of keeping such a massive secret was starting to wear on him. During his regular coffee stops at the local diner, he found himself avoiding conversations about crops and weather, afraid he might accidentally reveal something. When Tom Baker asked about the unusual activity in his fields, Michael mumbled something about soil testing and quickly changed the subject. The once comfortable community gatherings had become exercises in evasion and half-truths. His anxiety peaked one afternoon when he spotted a government agriculture vehicle driving slowly past his farm. Though it was probably just a routine survey, his heart raced until the vehicle disappeared from view. That night, he dreamed of hazmat-suited figures destroying his crops while he watched helplessly from the farmhouse window. The nightmares became recurring, each one featuring a different scenario of discovery and destruction. The technical challenges were mounting as well. His father's old equipment wasn't sophisticated enough to properly analyze all aspects of the purple wheat's behavior. He needed better tools, but purchasing new equipment would raise questions he couldn't answer. The local agricultural supply store had already commented on his increased purchases of sample containers and testing supplies. Every transaction felt like it might lead to unwanted attention or questions he couldn't afford to answer. Weather forecasts added another layer of worry. A major storm system was approaching, promising heavy rains and strong winds. How would the purple wheat respond to severe weather? Would the storm spread seeds beyond his property? He spent hours reinforcing barriers around test plots and setting up additional monitoring equipment, all while trying to maintain the appearance of normal farming activities. The thought of losing control over the spread kept him awake at night. His journal entries became increasingly conflicted. Day 24. Purple wheat continues to show remarkable properties, but spread pattern becoming erratic. Soil benefits still evident, yet something about the rate of change feels unnatural. Am I witnessing a breakthrough or unleashing something dangerous? Started having doubts about my ability to manage this situation alone. Each entry reflected growing uncertainty about the magnitude of what he was dealing with. The financial pressure hadn't disappeared either. While he was focused on the purple wheat, the rest of his farm still needed attention. Bills continued to arrive, and the bank was expecting updates on his payment plan. The irony wasn't lost on him. He might be sitting on an agricultural gold mine, but in the meantime, his regular obligations were becoming harder to meet. The contrast between his potential future wealth and current financial struggles was almost laughable. Pete, his farmhand, was starting to ask questions too. The changes in soil color and texture were becoming noticeable even in areas where the purple wheat wasn't visible. "Boss, something's different about that north field," Pete mentioned one morning. "Never seen the soil so dark, and the regular wheat's growing like crazy in spots." Michael dismissed it as the results of his new soil management program, but he could tell Pete wasn't entirely convinced. Each conversation with his trusted employee felt like a betrayal of their long-standing relationship. The scientific implications of his discovery were becoming more daunting. If the purple wheat was indeed creating its own beneficial soil ecosystem, what happened when it encountered different agricultural environments? Could it become invasive in other contexts? The research papers he'd been reading were full of cautionary tales about introduced species and unintended consequences. Every positive aspect of the purple wheat seemed to carry a potential dark side that he couldn't ignore. His children's weekend visits became particularly challenging. Emma, studying agricultural science in college, took an immediate interest in his experiments. Her questions were specific and technical, reflecting her academic training. Jason, with his business degree, wanted to know about the economic aspects of his research. Their curiosity was natural, but each conversation felt like navigating a minefield. He hated keeping secrets from his family, but the stakes seemed too high for full disclosure. Local agricultural forums were buzzing with discussions about unusual growth patterns in the region. While no one had specifically mentioned purple wheat, farmers were reporting unexpected soil improvements and enhanced growth in certain areas. Michael found himself obsessively monitoring these discussions, terrified that someone else might have discovered similar plants. Every post about unusual crop behavior made his heart race, wondering if his secret was about to be exposed. The breaking point came exactly 1 month after Michael's initial discovery of the purple wheat. The approaching storm system that had worried him all week finally hit with unprecedented fury. Montana storms were usually fierce, but this one was different, bringing not just rain and wind, but also large hail and tornado warnings. The Weather Service had called it a storm of the century, but for Michael it would become memorable for far more personal reasons. Michael spent that morning frantically trying to protect his test plots, rigging makeshift covers from old tarps and spare materials he had around the farm. The sky had turned an ominous green-black, and the wind was picking up strength with each passing hour. His anxiety reached new heights as he watched the purple wheat swaying violently in the strengthening gusts. Each gust seemed to make the purple stalks glow more intensely, as if they were responding to the atmospheric pressure changes. The storm hit just after noon. Golf ball-sized hail hammered down on his fields, shredding through his hastily constructed protective measures like paper. Lightning struck with alarming frequency, and the thunder was so loud it made the farmhouse windows rattle in their frames. Michael could only watch helplessly from inside as months of careful research and monitoring were literally being beaten into the ground. The violence of the storm seemed almost personal, as if nature itself was rejecting his experimental crop. But it wasn't the storm that proved to be the real crisis. As he stood at his kitchen window watching nature's fury unfold, a wave of dizziness suddenly overtook him. At first, he dismissed it as stress and lack of sleep, but within hours, his condition deteriorated rapidly. His throat felt like it was closing up and hives began appearing on his arms and neck. The reaction seemed to intensify with each passing minute, spreading across his skin like wildfire. Sarah found him collapsed in the workshop later that evening, surrounded by scattered notes and toppled sample containers. His breath was coming in short, wheezing gasps, and his skin was burning with fever. The connection didn't register immediately, but as she helped him to the car for the hour-long drive to the hospital in Great Falls, she noticed his hands were covered in purple stains from handling wheat samples earlier that day. The storm was still raging, making the drive treacherous, but his condition left them no choice. The emergency room staff were puzzled by his symptoms. His condition didn't match any typical allergic reactions or common illnesses. As his throat continued to swell, they rushed him to intensive care, pumping him full of antihistamines and steroids. The doctors asked Sarah countless questions about potential exposures to chemicals or unusual substances, but she could only tell them about his recent focus on crop experiments. Each new test seemed to raise more questions than answers. Through his feverish haze, Michael wanted to tell them about the purple wheat, but fear kept him silent. What if they quarantined his entire farm? What if they destroyed everything before understanding the wheat's potential benefits? His secret had become both a burden and a shield, even as it might be killing him. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on him. His miracle crop might prove to be his undoing. For 3 days, Michael drifted in and out of consciousness in the ICU. His blood tests showed bizarre anomalies that left the medical team baffled. His immune system appeared to be fighting something they couldn't identify, and conventional treatments were having limited effect. During his brief periods of lucidity, he was haunted by vivid dreams of his purple wheat fields spreading unchecked, consuming everything in their path. The fever dreams mixed reality and fantasy, showing him visions of purple wheat covering the entire state, transforming Montana's golden waves of grain into an alien landscape. Back at the farm, the situation was deteriorating on multiple fronts. The storm had caused significant damage to both regular and purple wheat crops. Pete was struggling to manage essential tasks alone, and Sarah was torn between staying at the hospital and overseeing urgent farm matters. The bank called about missed payments, and their insurance agent needed immediate storm damage assessments. Every hour brought new challenges and complications that threatened to overwhelm their already precarious situation. The forced absence from his farm tortured Michael more than his physical symptoms. He had no way of knowing how the purple wheat was responding to the storm damage, or whether his careful containment measures had held. Each time he closed his eyes, he imagined worst-case scenarios, the wind and rain spreading seeds across county lines, or his research samples contaminating the hospital's waste system. The lack of control over his discovery was perhaps the most painful aspect of his confinement. During one particularly rough night, his fever spiked to dangerous levels. The medical team worked frantically to bring his temperature down as his organs showed signs of stress. Sarah sat by his bedside, holding his hand and wondering what her husband had stumbled upon in those fields. She began to piece together the timeline, his changed behavior, the secret experiments, and now this mysterious illness. The worry lines on her face deepened as she realized how much he had been keeping from her. Emma and Jason rushed home from college when they heard about their father's condition. Their arrival brought both comfort and complications. Emma, with her agricultural science background, immediately wanted to investigate the farm's test plots to look for clues about their father's illness. Jason, more pragmatic, focused on dealing with insurance claims and keeping the bank at bay. Their presence added another layer of complexity to the situation. How much should they be told about what was really happening? On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. Michael's fever broke suddenly, and his symptoms began to improve as mysteriously as they had appeared. The doctors were cautiously optimistic but confused by his rapid recovery. Blood tests still showed abnormalities, but his body seemed to have adapted to whatever had caused the crisis. It was as if his immune system had finally figured out how to cope with whatever foreign element had triggered the reaction. As his strength slowly returned, Michael was tormented by the implications of his illness. Had the purple wheat triggered some sort of toxic reaction? Or was his body simply adjusting to prolonged exposure to something entirely new? The same qualities that made the wheat remarkable, its ability to alter soil chemistry and affect surrounding plants, now seemed potentially dangerous. Every benefit of his discovery now had to be weighed against possible risks he hadn't considered before. The hospital staff wanted to keep him for further observation and tests, but Michael knew he needed to get back to his farm. The setback had cost him precious time, and he dreaded what he might find when he returned. The storm's timing couldn't have been worse, right when the purple wheat was reaching a critical growth stage. Each hour in the hospital felt like another opportunity lost to understand and control his discovery. Sarah noticed a change in him during his recovery. The eager excitement that had driven him for the past month was replaced by a more cautious, almost fearful demeanor. Whatever he had been working on in secret had shown its darker side, and she could see the weight of that knowledge in his eyes. The experience had transformed him, forcing him to confront the true magnitude of what he might have discovered. Michael's hospitalization caused ripples through the tight-knit farming community of Chouteau County. Despite his recent secretive behavior, he was still one of their own, and farmers took care of each other. Word spread quickly about his mysterious illness, and soon the Anderson farm became a hub of community support, though none knew the true cause of his condition. In rural Montana, news traveled fast, and the community's response was swift and overwhelming. Tom Baker, his nearest neighbor, was the first to step up. Without being asked, he began checking on the farm's essential operations each morning before tending to his own land. Years of watching Michael's routines over the shared fence line had given him a good sense of what needed doing. He noticed the unusual patches in the wheat fields, but attributed them to storm damage rather than anything suspicious. Tom's quiet efficiency and discretion proved invaluable during these critical days. Sarah found herself overwhelmed by the outpouring of help. Church ladies arrived with casseroles and offers to help with laundry and cleaning. Local teens showed up to help Pete with basic farm maintenance. The farmers' cooperative adjusted delivery schedules for feed and supplies, ensuring nothing critical was missed during Michael's absence. Even the bank, usually strict about payment deadlines, granted a temporary reprieve after hearing about his condition. The community's response reminded Sarah of why they had chosen to stay in farming despite all the hardships. But the most significant support came from Dr. Rachel Chen, a retired agricultural scientist who had recently moved to the area. She had heard about Michael's illness through the local grapevine and recognized the symptoms from her years of research into plant-human interactions. One afternoon, while bringing food to Sarah, she quietly mentioned her background and offered to help understand what might have caused Michael's reaction. Her arrival seemed almost providential, bringing exactly the expertise they needed at precisely the right moment. "I spent 20 years studying unusual crop phenomena," she told Sarah over coffee in the kitchen. "The symptoms you described, they're not typical allergic reactions. They sound more like an adaptive response to something novel." Her words carried the weight of experience, and Sarah found herself sharing more details about Michael's recent behavior and his secretive experiments. Dr. Chen's gentle questioning and professional demeanor made it easy to trust her with information they'd been carefully guarding. Dr. Chen's involvement marked a turning point. When Michael returned from the hospital, still weak but determined to check on his fields, she was waiting at the farm with Emma, who had immediately recognized the value of having an expert's perspective. The three of them stood at the edge of the test plots, now partially recovered from the storm damage, and Michael finally felt the burden of his secret lifting. The relief of having knowledgeable allies was visible in his stance, even as he leaned on a walking stick for support. "I've never seen anything quite like this," Dr. Chen admitted, examining a purple wheat stalk with professional curiosity rather than alarm. "But I've read about similar phenomena, plants developing unusual characteristics that affect their entire ecosystem. Your reaction might have been your body adapting to something entirely new in our agricultural system." Her scientific approach helped transform their fear into focused inquiry. Emma's agricultural science background proved invaluable as she worked alongside Dr. Chen. They began documenting everything systematically, using proper scientific protocols that Michael's amateur efforts had lacked. Their presence helped legitimize his discovery while maintaining the privacy he needed. Dr. Chen's reputation in the scientific community provided a shield of credibility that kept unwanted attention at bay. The combination of academic knowledge and practical farming experience created a perfect balance in their research team. The local community's support extended beyond just maintaining the farm. Pete, who had suspected something unusual was happening but had kept quiet out of loyalty, now became an essential part of the observation team. His practical farming experience complemented Dr. Chen's scientific knowledge, and he helped implement more rigorous testing procedures while maintaining the appearance of normal farm operations. His years of experience with the local soil and weather conditions proved invaluable in understanding how the purple wheat was adapting to its environment. Sarah watched as her husband gradually opened up to this small circle of trusted allies. The weight of his secret had been crushing him, and sharing it with people who could actually help seemed to speed his recovery. She noticed how he began sleeping better, how the haunted look in his eyes started to fade. The isolation that had been consuming him gave way to cautious optimism. The transformation was remarkable. It was as if the burden of carrying this secret alone had been physically weighing him down. Jason, though less involved in the agricultural aspects, contributed by creating secure digital systems for documenting their findings. His business training helped him see the potential long-term implications of their discovery. He set up encrypted cloud storage for their research data and began developing preliminary plans for protecting their intellectual property rights. His modern approach to data management complemented the traditional farming knowledge of the others. Dr. Chen's presence also brought structure to their investigation. She helped them establish proper safety protocols, including protective gear when handling the purple wheat and regular health monitoring for everyone involved. Her experience with unusual agricultural phenomena helped them understand Michael's reaction as a warning sign rather than a catastrophe. Under her guidance, what had seemed like a potential disaster was transformed into a manageable research project. The human body often reacts strongly to revolutionary changes in agriculture, she explained during one of their evening research sessions. When humans first began processing certain crops, there were probably similar reactions. Your body was likely adjusting to something unprecedented in our agricultural experience. Her insights helped them understand the broader implications of their discovery. The community's help extended to keeping their secret. Though people noticed unusual activities at the Anderson farm, the presence of Dr. Chen gave everything a legitimate appearance. Locals assumed Michael was participating in some sort of official agricultural study, and their natural respect for privacy kept curious questions to a minimum. The culture of rural discretion worked in their favor, allowing them to conduct their research without unwanted scrutiny. As weeks passed, their small team developed a rhythm. Mornings began with Dr. Chen and Emma conducting field observations while Pete handled routine farm tasks. Sarah managed community interactions, deflecting attention when needed. Tom Baker's continued help with general farm maintenance gave them the space they needed to focus on understanding the purple wheat's potential. Each member of their impromptu research team found their niche, contributing their unique skills to the project. The pivotal moment came 6 weeks after Michael's return from the hospital. Dr. Chen had been meticulously analyzing samples of the purple wheat in a makeshift laboratory they'd set up in Michael's workshop, using equipment she'd quietly borrowed from former colleagues. On a crisp autumn morning, her excited voice echoed across the farm as she called everyone to gather. "You need to see this," she announced, her usually calm demeanor replaced by barely contained excitement. She gestured to the microscope where she'd been examining the latest samples. The small team crowded around as she explained her findings. "The cellular structure of this wheat is unlike anything previously documented in agricultural science. It's not just a mutation, it's an evolutionary leap." Through careful analysis, they had discovered that the purple wheat possessed unique characteristics at a molecular level. Its cells contained additional organelles that seemed to process nutrients in a completely new way. These structures appeared to be responsible for both the plant's unusual color and its remarkable ability to enrich the soil. Michael listened intently as Dr. Chen explained the implications. This wheat isn't just adapting to its environment, it's actively improving it. The root system releases compounds that stimulate beneficial soil bacteria and fungi. It's creating its own perfect growing conditions. She shuffled through pages of data, pointing out patterns that confirmed her conclusions. And the most remarkable part? It seems to be teaching neighboring plants to do the same. Emma, who had been conducting her own parallel research, chimed in with supporting evidence. The soil samples from the purple wheat zones showed unprecedented levels of organic matter and beneficial microorganisms. Even more surprisingly, these improvements persisted even after they removed the purple wheat, suggesting long-term positive changes to the soil structure. The breakthrough wasn't just scientific. Pete had been keeping detailed records of growth rates and crop health, and his practical observations supported their laboratory findings. The regular wheat growing near the purple wheat patches was showing increased vigor and resistance to common diseases. Yield estimates suggested these areas might produce up to 40% more grain than normal. Sarah watched her husband's face as he absorbed the news. The worry lines that had creased his forehead since his illness began to soften. This was the validation he had been hoping for, proof that his discovery wasn't just an agricultural anomaly, but potentially a revolution in sustainable farming. Jason, ever mindful of the business implications, had already started researching patent laws and agricultural regulations. "We need to move carefully," he advised during their impromptu meeting. "This isn't just about growing better wheat. This could change how we think about soil rehabilitation and sustainable agriculture worldwide." Dr. Chen agreed, adding her own perspective from years in agricultural research. "What we're seeing here could help address some of the most pressing issues in modern farming: soil degradation, water conservation, and chemical dependency. But we need to understand it completely before we go public." The team spent the next few days documenting everything meticulously. Emma and Dr. Chen worked on preparing detailed scientific analysis, while Pete and Michael focused on practical applications. They set up new test plots with varying conditions to better understand the purple wheat's adaptation capabilities. Their first controlled experiment involved planting purple wheat in some of the farm's most depleted soil. Within weeks, the results were undeniable. Not only did the purple wheat thrive in the poor conditions, but soil tests showed dramatic improvements in soil quality. The plant's ability to regenerate degraded land exceeded their most optimistic expectations. The implications of their discovery began to sink in. This wasn't just about saving one farm. It could potentially revolutionize agriculture in arid regions worldwide. The purple wheat's water efficiency and soil-enhancing properties could make farming viable in areas previously considered too marginal for crop production. Sarah noticed a new energy in their daily meetings. The cautious whispers of previous weeks were replaced by excited discussions about possibilities. Even Tom Baker, who had been helping mainly out of neighborly duty, became fully invested in the project once he understood its potential impact. Dr. Chen began reaching out to trusted colleagues, carefully feeling out potential allies in the scientific community. "We need to build a network of support before we go public," she explained. "The agricultural industry can be resistant to revolutionary changes. We need to have irrefutable evidence and influential supporters." The breakthrough also brought personal healing. Michael's health had stabilized, and Dr. Chen's theory about his initial reaction proved correct. His body had simply been adjusting to something entirely new in the agricultural environment. Regular health monitoring showed no lasting effects from his exposure to the purple wheat. Word of unusual activities at the Anderson farm had begun spreading beyond their immediate community. Agricultural supply companies noticed their changed ordering patterns. Satellite imagery showed distinct growth patterns in their fields. They knew they couldn't keep their discovery secret much longer, but now they had solid scientific data to support their claims. The true magnitude of their discovery became clear on a cold October morning, 3 months after Michael first spotted the purple wheat. Dr. Chen had been running advanced genetic analyses using equipment secretly borrowed from her old university lab, and her findings were about to change everything they thought they knew about their mysterious crop. The anticipation in the workshop was palpable as she gathered everyone for her announcement. "This isn't just a new variety of wheat," she announced, gathering everyone in the workshop-turned-laboratory. "What we're seeing is an entirely new subspecies that appears to have evolved in response to climate stress." She spread out pages of genetic sequencing data across the workbench, pointing to specific markers that supported her conclusion. "The plant has developed completely novel genetic pathways that allow it to not just survive in harsh conditions, but actively improve its environment." The technical details were complex, but the implications were clear. The purple wheat had somehow developed the ability to modify its own genetic structure in response to environmental challenges. More remarkably, it could pass these adaptations not just to its offspring, but to neighboring plants through a sophisticated network of root interactions and soil bacteria. The level of genetic complexity they were observing went beyond anything previously documented in agricultural science. Michael sat quietly as Dr. Chen explained how the wheat's unique properties could revolutionize agriculture far beyond their initial hopes. "This isn't just about better yields or soil improvement," she explained, her voice trembling with excitement. "This wheat could potentially help restore degraded farmland worldwide. It's not just resistant to climate change, it actively combats it by sequestering carbon in the soil at rates we've never seen before. The implications for global agriculture are staggering. Emma, who had been assisting with the genetic analysis, added her own insights. The purple coloration isn't just cosmetic, she explained, pulling up detailed microscope images on her laptop. Those pigments are part of a complex system that allows the plant to harvest solar energy more efficiently than any known crop. It's photosynthesis taken to a whole new level. She proceeded to show time-lapse videos of the purple wheat's growth patterns, demonstrating its unprecedented rate of development and adaptation. The team's expertise had grown considerably over the past months. Pete, once just a farmhand, had become an expert in observing and documenting the wheat's behavioral patterns. He shared his latest findings about how the purple wheat seemed to protect neighboring crops from pests and diseases. It's like it creates a natural shield, he explained. We haven't seen a single case of rust or mildew in any field adjacent to the purple wheat. Even insects that typically devastate crops seem to avoid these areas entirely. Sarah, who had been managing their growing database of observations, noticed patterns that others had missed. The purple wheat's influence on soil health seemed to extend far beyond its immediate vicinity. Soil samples taken up to half a mile away showed improved microbial activity and nutrient content. The plant's beneficial effects were spreading throughout the entire farm ecosystem. Her meticulous record-keeping had revealed a consistent pattern of soil improvement that radiated outward from the purple wheat patches. Their latest soil analyses showed something even more remarkable. The purple wheat was actually helping to break down and remove agricultural pollutants from previous years of conventional farming. Heavy metals and chemical residues were being neutralized through some unknown biological process. The soil wasn't just becoming more fertile, it was being actively detoxified. Jason, who had been quietly working on the business implications, presented his own breakthrough. I've been consulting with agricultural patent attorneys, he revealed. The unique genetic structure of this wheat makes it patentable. We could protect our discovery while still making it available to farmers who need it most. His research had uncovered potential paths for commercialization that could balance profit with global agricultural benefit. He had already drafted preliminary plans for a sustainable business model that would ensure the technology remained accessible to small farmers. Dr. Chen's former colleagues had begun asking questions about her borrowed equipment and unusual research requests. The scientific community was picking up on hints that something significant was happening in this corner of Montana. We need to move quickly now, she advised. Others will make this discovery soon enough. We need to be ready. She had already begun preparing preliminary research papers, carefully documenting every aspect of their discovery. The revelation of the wheat's true nature brought both excitement and new challenges. They needed to understand the full implications before going public. What would happen if the plant's adaptive abilities continued to evolve? How would it behave in different climates and soil types? The questions seemed endless, but now they had solid scientific evidence to back their research. Michael's health had fully stabilized, and Dr. Chen's analysis revealed why. The wheat wasn't just adapting to its environment, it was helping other organisms, including humans, adapt to it. His initial reaction had been his body learning to interact with something entirely new in nature. Blood tests showed unusual but beneficial changes in his immune system, suggesting a symbiotic relationship developing between the wheat and those who worked closely with it. The timing of their discovery seemed almost providential. Climate change was wreaking havoc on traditional agriculture worldwide. Farmers everywhere were struggling with soil degradation and increasingly unpredictable weather patterns. The purple wheat offered potential solutions to multiple crises simultaneously: soil restoration, climate resilience, and sustainable food production. That evening, as the team reviewed their findings, Michael finally voiced what they had all been thinking. "This isn't just about saving my farm anymore," he said quietly. "We have a responsibility to share this with the world. But we have to do it right." The others nodded in agreement, understanding the weight of their situation. They knew they were standing on the brink of an agricultural revolution, one that could change the face of farming forever. The transformation of the Anderson farm over the next year exceeded even their most optimistic predictions. The purple wheat had spread strategically across their fields, creating a stunning patchwork of deep purple and traditional golden wheat that drew curious glances from passing cars. But the real miracle was happening beneath the surface, where years of soil depletion were being reversed in ways that defied conventional agricultural wisdom. Soil tests conducted by independent laboratories confirmed what they had discovered. The entire farm's soil quality had improved dramatically, showing nutrient levels and microbial activity that agricultural experts called unprecedented. The purple wheat had established a complex network throughout their land, gradually transforming even the most depleted areas into rich, fertile ground. Each new soil analysis revealed improvements that seemed to accelerate rather than plateau, suggesting the beneficial changes could continue indefinitely. The decision to go public with their discovery came after months of careful preparation. Dr. Chen had assembled a comprehensive research paper, documenting every aspect of the purple wheat's properties and its potential impact on global agriculture. Emma had contributed detailed analyses of its growth patterns and soil rehabilitation capabilities, while Jason had developed a framework for making the technology accessible to farmers worldwide. Their preparation paid off as they navigated the intense scrutiny that followed their announcement. Their announcement sent shockwaves through the agricultural community. Initial skepticism quickly gave way to excitement as independent researchers verified their findings. The purple wheat's ability to improve soil health while requiring minimal inputs represented a paradigm shift in sustainable agriculture. Agricultural universities worldwide began requesting samples for research, and sustainable farming organizations hailed it as a potential solution to global food security challenges. The media attention was overwhelming, but their careful documentation and transparent approach helped maintain their credibility. Michael's farm became a living laboratory, hosting scientists and agricultural experts from around the world. But he insisted on maintaining its working farm status, demonstrating that the purple wheat could integrate seamlessly into existing agricultural operations. The Anderson farm showcased how traditional farming wisdom could combine with groundbreaking innovation to create something revolutionary. Regular tours showed visitors every stage of the process, from initial planting to harvest, proving that the technology was both revolutionary and practical. The patent they secured ensured that the discovery would be used responsibly. Rather than selling it exclusively to large agricultural corporations, they established a non-profit foundation to oversee its distribution. The foundation, named in honor of Michael's father, focused on making the purple wheat available to small farmers and communities most affected by soil degradation and climate change. Their licensing model ensured that the technology remained affordable while generating enough revenue to fund ongoing research and development. Sarah noticed the biggest change in Michael himself. The worried farmer who had once faced losing everything had become a passionate advocate for sustainable agriculture. He spoke at farming conferences, sharing not just their discovery, but the importance of being open to nature's unexpected gifts. His story inspired other farmers to look more closely at their own fields, wondering what mysteries might be waiting to be discovered. The transformation in his confidence and purpose was remarkable to everyone who knew him. Pete's role evolved from farmhand to chief operations manager of their expanding research facility. His practical knowledge proved invaluable as they developed guidelines for implementing the purple wheat system on other farms. Tom Baker became their first test case for expanding beyond the Anderson farm, and his success story added credibility to their claims. The training program they developed under Pete's guidance became the gold standard for implementing the new technology. Dr. Chen's contribution was recognized by the scientific community, leading to renewed interest in studying natural agricultural innovations. Her work sparked a new field of research focused on understanding and cultivating beneficial plant mutations that could help address climate change and food security challenges. Universities began establishing research programs specifically focused on identifying and developing similar adaptive crops. Emma decided to refocus her agricultural studies, specializing in the new field of adaptive crop development. Jason's business model for ethical agricultural innovation became a case study at leading universities. Together, they represented the next generation of agricultural leadership, combining scientific knowledge with social responsibility. Their approach to balancing commercial viability with social impact influenced how other agricultural innovations were developed and distributed. The impact extended far beyond their small Montana community. Farms in drought-stricken regions reported successful trials with the purple wheat, seeing soil improvement and water retention that made previously unproductive land farmable again. The technology began spreading globally, offering hope to communities struggling with the effects of climate change and soil degradation. Success stories poured in from every continent, each adding to their understanding of the wheat's capabilities in different environments. 1 year after their public announcement, Michael stood in his fields watching the sunset paint the purple wheat in spectacular hues. The farm that had nearly slipped through his fingers had become a symbol of hope for agricultural communities worldwide. But more importantly, it had shown that solutions to global challenges could come from unexpected places, arising from the careful observation and stewardship of the land. The journey from discovery to implementation had transformed not just his farm, but his entire understanding of agriculture's potential. As visitors continued to arrive at the Anderson farm, each seeking to understand and learn from their discovery, Michael often shared the most important lesson he had learned. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come not from imposing our will on nature, but from being open to its mysteries and willing to adapt to its innovations. His story became a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of remaining open to unexpected possibilities, even in the darkest times. The story of the purple wheat that changed farming forever had begun with one farmer's desperate hope for survival and ended up offering hope to farmers worldwide. It served as a reminder that even in our most challenging moments, breakthrough solutions might be growing right beneath our feet, waiting for someone to notice and nurture them into reality. The Anderson farm had become more than just a success story. It was a blueprint for how innovation, community support, and respect for nature could combine to address some of humanity's most pressing challenges.